Hello, everybody. It is Aaron Christensen with Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and this is Scare-A-Thon 2022, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. Today, we are going to be visiting, we're all going to the World's Fair is the film for today, and we're all going to go a little crazy along the way. I knew that I wanted to bring in some big brains for this one, and since I don't have much to spare, I called on my good pal, S.A. Bradley. He is an author. He is a podcaster. He is a genius, and I'm glad to have him on the show. Whoops, I just took him out. Let's bring him in. There we go. And are you unmuted? Yes, you can talk now. Okay.
Hello. Well, thank you so much. Oh boy, I'll talk about a little bit of pressure.
Scott has written a great book called Screaming for Pleasure. He has his amazing podcast, which is Hellbent for Horror.
Yay.
And I'm really excited to talk to you about this film because I watched it last night, and yeah, it's one that I know it's going to stay with me for a long time, but I could not stop thinking about it. In many regards, just, like how it's going to land with different people.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's truly, it's one of those films that I think you'll either love it or hate it. And hopefully you can appreciate it, if nothing else.
Yeah. It's almost in its own like subgenre. It reminds me of, well, it's found footage in some ways, but it's also like, you remember David Holtzman's Diary from like the 70s? There was a Jim McBride film. So there's an old Jim McBride film that you have to watch. It's about a guy who is basically talking about his life. He has a camera and a Nagra on his bed, and he sits there and talks about, and you realize he's a stalker for this woman and a whole bunch of other weird things in that movie. But David Holtzman's Diary is kind of like one of the first movies that breaks that fourth wall, allows you in to something that's so arch. It's so obvious that it's a film. It doesn't make any bones. And what I like about this movie is that it also doesn't make any bones that there are other movies out there. They reference Paranormal Activity several times, and not in a kind of wink, wink, nod thing. It's as you would normally talk about.
Yeah, right. I mean, we all know Paranormal Activity exists in the world, so let's talk about it.
And this is a very interesting movie. I'm glad that you said that would stick with you. I did not expect it to stick with me. I started watching it, and I'm going, this is like Emile Zola's naturalism. If she's going to walk to a barn and it takes 2 minutes, we're going to take 2 minutes to walk to the barn. And I was like going, oh boy, this might be a rough one. And yet I found that worked so well into the themes of isolation and loneliness that just permeate this film. And I mean, the very beginning, it's such a wonderfully weird and ironic title, right? We're all going to the World's Fair. It's like in the distance, there's this place that at some point we'll all be happy. We just get to this place, but it's also a trap in this movie. It's really a trap. So I love the idea that it has such an idiosyncratic name. And then the first shot that you see is a girl named Casey who's staring not at you. She's staring into space to the side. She's eating the most bland food in the world. Like, it's just for sustenance. She's eating mozzarella sticks, right? So she's just eating a raw mozzarella stick, and she's reciting. We think she's live, but she's not live. She's saying, hi, Casey here. She doesn't like the sound of her voice. She does it again, but she's not looking at us. It's like she's in this nether world already. And it's the world of the extremely online generation, as the director, Jane Schoenbrun, said. And Jane is someone who is a transsexual, who is also not only just transitioned, but is also, I forget the
non-binary, right?
Non-binary, thank you, non-binary. And so this movie comes from a certain feeling that they had back in the early 2000s with the internet that you could still hide in. And you get this, and there's no hiding now, is basically what they said. But this was a time when you could find a small spot to become whatever you needed to be. And their idea on this was that the internet makes you a bodiless entity. You can be whatever you want to be. And so you get this ghostly feel from the very beginning, and yet you're rooted in this hyper realism. Like, there's nothing cinema about this. And then it becomes like real cinema by the end, because I mean, what is cinema? It's not a camera angle.
Well, and just a quick premise, like the premise is this woman Casey, young girl, is she's creating kind of this, she wants to participate. She's, very small following. Like I get the sense that there's like, maybe like 2 people who stumble on her channel from time to time. And there's kind of a sadness just inherent in that there's somebody who's putting her quote art out there and nobody cares, but she's going to take what's called this World Fair Challenge, which is, I'm going to throw this term out there and I can't say I really know what it is, but it's a creepypasta where you are online and you are communicating with each other through videos that you post. So rather than like a chat room, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to hang with the kids.
Yeah.
But rather than a chat room, like you're creating videos to respond to each other, and it gives people are able to watch basically your conversation through the videos that you're posting. But this particular setup, the World's Fair, is supposedly, it's like a haunted viewing. If you watch it, things start to happen to you physically, emotionally, mentally. And so that's the World's Fair Challenge. And so she's putting on her show, she's doing the World's Fair Challenge, and then she's going to report back as to what changes are occurring in her body and in her life.
It's really an interesting idea. It's like a digital possession, but it's also, I think they mention Mandela effect at one point. And what's interesting about this movie is that you can watch little things that you think are just normally on YouTube, but nothing on a film is just arbitrary. Anything that's written on the film, anything that's written in the YouTube description is there for a purpose. So there's a scene where she's trying to go find these World's Fair videos on something that looks a lot like YouTube. And there are all these little things like what was it? The spiral effect, the strange loop theory. It talks about Mandela effect. So it's the idea of like almost a group hysteria that you slowly build into. So the idea of the World's Fair Challenge is, they say, this is welcome to the world's scariest online game. We cannot be held responsible for whatever you become. Not if you turn into a monster, whatever you become. Very specific words. And it says, we want you to begin reporting your symptoms, whatever happens after you do this thing, which is you repeat 3 times like Bloody Mary, I want to go to the World's Fair. Then you prick your finger with blood, you wipe it on the screen. And then you watch a video, which we don't get to see. We just see the reverberations of multiple colors and ASMR sounds coming through on the face of Casey. But after that, they say, once you begin that, if other viewers or other players like the direction that your story is going, they will drop in and help further it. So it's like you're building something. It's almost like jazz, and it's almost like what we do at conventions, where we meet each other to have this connection, but there's no connection. It's a ghostly connection. There's never touch. In fact, in this movie, Casey never is in the frame, I think, with another full-bodied human being. There's a father that's somewhere out there that's just a voice and car lights. She stays away from this person. Her only connection is to a person that is faceless at first, just a weird skull picture. JBL, is that his name?
JLB.
JLB.
And he's just initials, it's like that's how anonymous he is.
Everybody is anonymous in this. We don't know if Casey's real name is Casey. Towards the end, we find out that it may not be. But I love how it's this virtual thing that the way that it furthers itself is by people going, your story is interesting. And it reminds me of a movie called Like Me that came out from Glass Eye Pix a while back, but only the very beginning of it, which is this woman who decides to go on a crime spree to get likes. And she has people who are her arch enemies that they've never met. And they're just like putting up videos about each other on there. And it's kind of in this movie, it's involving in that way. There's a almost Kubrickian moment when when she's in this barn and she goes and finds, the rifle of her father, but then she doesn't leave. She has a screen up, a projection screen and a small projector, and she puts on this ASMR video of someone who is rubbing her head, saying, "Oh, you had a nightmare. Shh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay." And she lays there on her side in the winter in a barn, watching someone who's not there pet her head and assure her that everything's going to be okay. And I'm like, where's mom?
Right.
Suddenly gives me all these questions. Where is any nurturing for this person? It's all online. And so you're hit with this. What I think makes this movie so cinematic is that it doesn't just go to scare you. It doesn't just go on a concept. It starts hitting you with feelings. You start having an emotional investment in the damage that seems to be happening to this young girl.
Well, and what's okay, so that you bring up the excellent point, which is this in fact a horror film? And I think for your most casual fan, they're going to be watching this going, nothing happens in this movie.
Right.
You know, like it's just her talking, and you know, like then we have this kind of back and forth, but like it doesn't deliver the shocks and surprises and jump scares. Everything kind of does roll out in a very like, if you have an emotional response to it, it's a, oh no, or
Right.
what's happening, or is this real? Or so it's kind of an unnerving kind of horror as opposed to like a shock or a gore,
Yeah.
gore surprise, anything like that. So, you know, like as I was watching it, like you, I mean, I'm sitting through the first 20 minutes and going, oh man, like I don't know if, did you ever see a movie called Megan is Missing?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so
That
it
was what I was
reminded
going
me,
to bring up.
it reminded me a little bit of Megan is Missing, minus, you know, the big shocks. Where I was just like, oh man, like this is just, I got to hang out with how many of these lonely people am I going to have to hang out with? And the fact is, you hang out with the one, and you start to really identify with her and empathize with the fact that she's so like disconnected. And I could not help but think, I'm like, how indicative is this of this generation, that they
Yeah.
are all out there looking for something, looking for. I talked to friends of mine like who are like in the dating world, and they're like, no, you don't meet anybody in the real world anymore. Like that's
Right.
not how dating works anymore. I'm like, I can't even conceive of like, wait, you don't like have just like interactions with people. You meet them at parties, or you meet them over at a friend's house. No, if you meet somebody, it's online, and you have to be saying, hey, I'm looking for somebody. And I was like,
Right.
man, like the world has shifted. And I mean,
Yes.
I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know, but like the world has shifted so much that's like, no, these are where the relationships occur.
Yeah.
I mean, you and
It's
I, for that matter. I mean, you know, we've met in person a couple of times, but
right.
most of our interactions are done via email, via, you know, like
Hmm.
a Zoom chat or
Online.
whatever.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring that up as well, because we may see this film as weird, but I think it is indicative of a time period that I think that many people, especially in the responses that I saw online, because this movie made me dig. It made me go, I need to find out who this person is,
Right.
what this video is. Was that a real video, or was that made for the film? All this stuff, and I saw how many people deeply connected with this, that this is a level of detachment and loneliness, a dysphoria that is happening right now. And I think that's when you talk about whether this is a horror film or not, I think it is, but it may be leaving some of us in the dust because technology does that to us. And I think that this is a movie that's keeping up with a level of technology in storytelling, how
Yeah.
stories get
Yeah.
told. The language is very different than when I was growing up, but it's still the language of the times. And so, whether this is a horror movie or not, what I usually say is, what does the creator want you to go home with? What's the feeling they want you to go home with? You know, Bambi can be scary twice in the movie, but you go home, it's an orgy of joy and life. But this movie is not. This movie has a very subtle, disturbing shock, kind of like Personal Shopper has. It has this really dark, ghostly almost ending, which we have to talk about with a flag because
Yep.
that's a spoiler thing. But the ending is like, I had to rewatch it because I was going, did I just, that is, oh my God, this could be three different things right now. And none of them are pleasant. None of them
Yeah.
are good.
Right.
And so this idea of does horror give you dread, repulsion, disgust, fear, all these things? Dysphoria is another one. Do I just feel unnerved? And
Yes.
this movie made me feel unnerved and itchy all the way through it because I I could see the pain. I'm not an actor. I know that you act. You must have been thinking something of this woman's performance because
Oh,
she holds the whole thing.
well, I mean, I mean, like, and they kind of make a grand statement in the opening credits where they say, you know, in her feature film debut, what is
Yeah,
the actress's name? Anna Cobb.
yeah,
You know,
Anna
say
Cobb.
in her feature film debut. I'm like, well, that's kind of aggrandizing, isn't it? It's like, you know, just
Right,
well, and there's also there's something. My first instinct is like, well, you can't judge her too harshly because it's her feature film debut, so be kind.
right.
Um, but you don't need to be kind because she's extraordinary. And what we as we get deeper into it, we start to question, and we will be throwing spoiler banner up in a second here, because as we get deeper into it, we start to wonder, is any of what we're seeing authentic? You
Right.
know, how much of this is a performance? Because we have her stuff that she records, but there's a second that, you know, there's a camera, a non-diegetic camera that follows her around.
Yes.
You know, like, it is a movie. She is a character in a movie, and someone is you know, shaping this movie,
Right.
even as she is shaping her story. You know, so
Yeah.
there's that kind of Russian doll effect going on.
Yeah. There is this really jolting change in perspective. You know,
Yeah,
who are we seeing this movie through? And
yeah.
at times we're not sure. I mean, there are so on. I don't know how much of a spoiler alert this might
Let's
be,
just
but
throw the
it's not
spoiler banner up and let's go wild.
okay. Because
There we go.
what I loved was how you see these first videos, and they're exactly what you would think: insane clowns and people pretending that they're possessed. And then it starts getting really strange. There's a kid who's sitting on the floor saying that he's being drowned by Tetris, that this thing is coming up like Tetris, and he has to play the game the entire time to keep it from drowning him in his throat. And I was like going, okay, that's interesting. Now we're going to see how many likes he has. Huge amount of likes compared to the other people. So we're seeing that people are arbitrarily making up these stories on these videos. And at one point, there's a guy with a sore in his arm, and he starts scratching at it, and he pulls out old carnival tickets, like the admit one tickets, a long stream of them, and he's making these weird ecstatic noises while he's doing it. It's really kind of disturbing in that fashion, but we're not sure who's watching this, because there are times when the camera's set up where we can see Casey and her computer, and we see the person in a long view. And then all of a sudden that cuts away, and a seamless cut in a way. It took me a moment to realize, wait, there's no frame around here. We're in the room with this guy.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there and he's rubbing his arm. So we have a God's eye camera going through this film. And when we think we're watching with only the perspective of a fly on the wall in the room with Casey, we're not there at all. We're out in the woods with her at certain points, watching her set things up. Everybody is setting things up. There's the other character, the three initials. I can't believe I keep wanting to say LBJ, the old speakers, JLB. So we see him seemingly heartfelt speaking, but all his words are on his screen. He has text boxes of everything that he says, including what we think of at the end, where we're like, kind of, are we feeling something real here or not? It's really, really disturbing. So I don't want to go too deep into what's happening, but there are moments that chilled me, and I couldn't tell if I was supposed to think that this is actually happening, if this was a made-up video by Casey. And it's rare for a movie still to creep me out so much. And it's something that you've seen a million times, but it was just done so perfectly. And it's her sleeping and the 4 o'clock in the morning thing, just the way the face looked.
Yep.
There's this weird transformation that happens. I had chills, and I had to restart. I had to rewind and watch it again, and it still gave me chills.
Yep.
And that shows me how subjective horror is, because someone else could watch that and not feel that. Yet somehow it really, really disturbed me, because it felt the thing that I think is really interesting about found footage films is they don't want artifice. They force artifice, the lack of artifice at times. So the idea that it's washed out, not perfectly framed, all that stuff makes it feel real. So when she is moving in and the light catches her in bed and this weird transformation happens, it really made me gasp, far more than like Black Hole Sun video or anything like that would do. This just really creeped me out. And I think that weird lack of wanting to be cinema or cinematic makes these movies very scary at times, because you let down your guard at a certain point. You start going on this idea, we haven't even started talking about the idea that there's this Ouroboros tale happening here, where we have the constant refreshing going, these arrows spinning, and in a way where we end up right where we started watching these things. And the idea that's put up there is how you can watch YouTube with the auto start.
Yep.
You never have to touch the computer. It's just story after story rolling by. And this movie does that with these people's lives. It's really
well. I mean, as a great point, is it's infinite. You know, you don't have to have a life at all.
Right.
You can just sit and watch other people's lives, and then the way you participate is by giving them something to look at, and so that they disconnect from their lives. I want to talk a little bit about JLD, because we do peer beyond. We finally get, and again, it's an extraordinary thing. Like, we've been seeing everything from Casey's POV, and then suddenly we're on the other side of the screen, and we see JLB, and we see that he's
middle-aged,
bald-headed guy who seems to be alone, but is he? Like, we see some figures that may or may not be
wife or mother. I couldn't tell, because when we see him, he's in a room that is a boys' room. There are bowling trophies or sports trophies, and there are clown ceramics. It's like, moved out, mom brought the clown ceramics in. Oh, you're back in. Okay, sit here. Don't move the clown ceramics. They stay. You can stay as long as they're there.
And he gives, I mean, like, as you say, he gives it kind of like a heartfelt connection, but he's either done this before, because you say it's written out, or he doesn't know what to say. And so he's rehearsed this ahead of time, in the same way that we saw Casey rehearsing.
Yeah.
And there becomes the suspicion of, is he grooming her? Is he a pedophile? Right. Is he somebody who's trying to pretend he's somebody he's not? But you get the sense that he genuinely cares for her.
Yeah.
He is genuinely concerned, but is he genuinely concerned for her safety, or is he genuinely concerned because the fish is going to get off the hook? Right. It's really, I love how much we don't get, and how much story we are forced to bring ourselves.
It was such a bold choice to show that character, and to show that character as someone who was much older, middle-aged, and that Casey is young, and not have that play out. Not hide from it, but not have that be the obvious play out thing. It was very risky, and it felt really unsettling, because if he was catfishing, you would assume that once there was a little bit of trouble, like, this will bring the police, I'm out of here. Right. But he doesn't. He stays going, and he continues to make these comments that say, when you're young, sometimes these thoughts get into your head. And so he's empathizing as if he's gone through this. But there's also this weird thing in the very beginning of when they meet each other. He puts this thing, you are in trouble. You are in serious trouble. You must contact me. Right. And this scary visual. And so he scares her to get her to speak. And he goes, I'm sorry if I scared you with the video. I just needed to somehow get you to talk.
Get your attention. Yeah.
I want to get your attention. He goes, yeah, it was pretty creepy. And he goes, oh, thanks. and there's that funny moment of like, oh, you actually caught that. But there's then this moment where I think he said, when he was still blank, his face was still covered, I need you to promise me that this is real, which is kind of like saying, this statement is false. You can't. Yeah, it's. I think that's what the idea of the strange loop is, where you are in a contradiction. The very statement is a contradiction. Of course, she's lying. You're in a game, but now let me promise, which is going to just deepen this lie. Well, and you can see her smile.
And within that promise, it is the commitment that we're both going to do this together. Like we are. This is. And it becomes real if we both say it's real.
It's intimate. It's
Yeah,
intimate
exactly
in a
right.
way that kind of like when we go to conventions and we see convention family, we call them convention family. There's an intimacy to being able to speak about vulnerabilities like we do. And we
Yeah,
talk through images of other films and things such as, but we're talking about ourselves as much as we're talking about those movies.
for
And
sure.
so there is an intimacy of creation. Creation is intimate. You're sitting there and deciding that you're going to have a sense of play with this person. And they're doing it with horror ideas, right? Which is really interesting. And she taught, and is this a coming of age film? I
Right.
mean, is she going through the changes that normally would happen at her age? And there's this astonishing sequence where she's singing a song. She hasn't sung a song
Oh
or
man.
anything for a while, and she's singing this terribly heartbreaking story about love in winter. And she's just so putting herself out there for nobody. And then she starts screaming.
Yeah.
And then she just jumps back into singing this Love in Winter
Yeah.
song.
And you're like, oh, nothing, what is authentic here at all,
Yeah,
you know? And
right.
she's able to go to that place and then just pull right back from it.
Yeah, as if nothing happened. She
Yep.
has this doll, Poe, which was there with her from her 5th day of living on this planet. I love you, says Poe. And you know in your heart that that's the worst thing that Poe could have possibly said. Something terrible is going to happen to Poe by saying, I love you. And how this movie gets me to feel terrible about that.
Yeah.
That they build so much because there's nothing for her. There are no humans. Of course, we're going to anthropomorphize this doll. And it's the only connection that she has that makes her feel okay. It helps me sleep. And then she goes, I'm still afraid of the dark. And you go, oh dear, this is not going to go well.
And again, we go, how much of this is real?
Yeah.
Is Poe just a prop? Is Poe
Yes.
just a prop that she's brought in because it's going to make a better story?
Right.
And just to jump to the end, I mean, when JLB tells his story, and you go, this isn't real. Is this real?
Yeah.
This isn't real. Is this real? And you go, and again, it's the story. If we choose to believe it's real for me.
Yeah.
And that's what the internet is. It's like, I can buy into this if I choose to.
Yeah. Is he nostalgic in his wistfulness and in his look, or is he deluded? Because this is an ending, the way he's talking, the ending, which we do not see.
No.
It's written on the screen. Everything that he's saying is written on the screen of his computer. It's reminiscent of The Last Laugh, that movie, the silent film.
Oh, yeah, the Lon Chaney. Yeah.
Where in the end, the guy is. Oh no, The Last Laugh is Emil Jannings. Yes, where he's the doorman at that place, and he's super proud, and then his life falls apart because he's fired. And in the end, everything works like It's a Wonderful Life, and it's so false that that you're supposed to go, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt with this. I was going, he's saying all this stuff. We're having coffee and we hugged at Penn Station, and you can almost visualize all that. I'm waiting for the final shot to be the shot from Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer with a suitcase on the side of the road. That's what I was expecting. I'm like, Casey's dead, and this is he's talking to the police right now. They're taking his
statement,
statement because she was found dead in her house.
Right.
And his connection was with her on the internet and everything. So it was so bizarre to have him. He's going to force a happy ending. Is he forcing resolution because he does not know? And that's something that the director talked about, that did not want to have a resolution of an end, did not want this movie to have beginning, middle, end, 3 acts.
Right.
Wanted this to be like the internet, where people just disappear. People just delete their accounts.
Well, and
no idea.
What I thought, and because it was funny, you thought of the Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer ending, because for me, it was she's blocked him. She can't see anything he's doing. And so he can tell whatever story he wants to tell.
Yeah.
And she'll never see it to contradict it.
Yeah.
Well, and there was also a part of me that's like, well, maybe she's, moved on and she actually has left the internet and isn't part of this game anymore and doesn't see it. And she's free.
Yeah.
But again, these are all stories. These are the stories that I'm making up. Exactly.
Yeah, I thought it was so simple. It's something that I love about found footage when it works correctly. And
Mm,
I'm using the term found footage, and I don't want to make it seem as if this is your traditional found footage. I don't think there is a traditional found footage anymore. I think really bad, lazy movies are traditional found footage at this point. They're the ones that don't surprise you. But there are so many different styles
yeah.
of films. I talk about horror as the Nile, where all these different tributaries are coming in. And found footage is like the Tigris of the Euphrates at this point, has multiple small streams, but they all want to do the same thing, which is break from the standard concepts of what beginning, middle, and end are, and what a cinematic event is. And I think when they work so well, the rawness of them make them genius. So I know a lot of people did not like Blair Witch. I still love Blair Witch
Sure.
because
Yeah.
there's just this. I thought it was so brilliant and experimental to have the actors hold the cameras and do all this stuff and see what would happen. It also was an event. But Paranormal Activity is like pure cinema. It's like silent film where you just have the box and they put a still camera and our eyes never stop moving all over the screen, waiting for whatever it is that's going to happen. And they pattern it in a way that we feel dread before the end of a daylight scene because we know nighttime is going to be unsettling. And then they switch it up and have a daytime scene be frightening. And I'm like, this is brilliant. They do so. The minimalism is what makes the audience work. And to me, found footage allows this connection and it's ownership, that we are part owners in the narrative when we are watching found footage films, and specifically this one, because this movie leaves it open, gives you the story, but leaves out resolution. Every time on all of these things, we have no idea what's real. We have no idea what's fake. And instead of that being frustrating, and it may frustrate some viewers,
Sure. Exactly.
but I think that this is something that I'm trying to figure out. What is the next thing that's going to happen in horror, in cinema? Because the way that technology is going, horror and cinema always follow where technology goes. What our film languages consistently changes. And so to sit there and pretend that things were the best in the 80s is wonderful from my nostalgia, but is not true. There is a language to the cinema that is happening now that may leave me behind. But I think so much of it, we have an entire 2 generations now of people playing video games that are horror motivated, that are cinematic in their own way, but there is agency of the viewer. The viewer propels the story.
Yeah.
And so being on YouTube, being on Zoom, that has changed the language completely. And it has changed what we assume a proper framing is. All of that stuff has changed with the tension that there is in the thing that we see on YouTube. And what I think is interesting, and what I'm trying to figure out, is how are we going to get people to want to go into a theater and watch a 3-act play, which is already predetermined, when the audience has had so much agency for 2 generations to how the story starts to move. And you can see 1917 feels like a role player game, and the role player games are trying to look like cinema. So there's this weird marriage that's going to happen somewhere. And I can't help but feel movies like this, we are going to the World's Fair, we're all going to the World's Fair, are kind of like the shot over the bow of some ship, the Fort Sumter moment, whatever it is. There's this feeling that, okay, you're now talking more about what's not in this film than you are about what's in this
But what's
film.
actually in it. Exactly right. And I mean, the audiences have continued to evolve as well. I mean, I remember thinking, like way back when, people were watching Blair Witch and going, "Oh my God, the shaky cam, I was, it was making me sick." And like, now this is what you watch when you watch like primetime TV.
Yeah.
Is that same kind of like handheld everything. You're like, we just evolve.
Yeah.
So
This is another formation, a mutation of what made George Romero's Night of the Living Dead so good. Night of the Living Dead was in black and white and handheld, just like the news was.
like the news, exactly.
And now the news is shaky and it's from people's camera phones.
Right.
So we are now seeing reality as a shaky camera phone. Back in the day when I was watching video movies, I was like, God, it doesn't look like cinema at all. It looks bald and blah, and everything moves too fast. What the hell? It's gross and doesn't look good at all. And now that's what it is. It's the coin of the realm.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So it's really intriguing to me where it goes. And I love that this film got me thinking about that, because it goes directly at it, right? It's going directly at artifice. It's going directly at, and on a personal level for the director, it's going at what is me and what is the body that I inhabit. And so you can be anything that you want to be in the internet, but it also comes at a cost. And the cost is you're not really connecting with anybody. It's never corporeal. The body is never there.
You're going to be stuck in front of a screen.
Yeah, you are floating. And at one point in the movie, Casey's trying to talk a live chat, and she can't articulate the right words. She gets frustrated and embarrassed and says, "I'm sorry, I don't get to talk to people that often."
Right.
And so it's this idea, the personae, and here I am, I'm S.A. Bradley, right? When I go to conventions and I speak in lectures, I have my battle vest on, which is a leather vest full of all these pins from horror movies of past. And that is, S.A. Bradley has tensile steel skin. Scott Bradley gets upset when, someone says, "Oh, you're still here." So, I'm already part of that. I have my own artifice. I have my own skin that I wear when I'm in these public moments. And so this is just a movie that goes directly at that, and I think is really intriguing. And the spoiler alert is just a line, which I think is in the very beginning. She says, let's see, I have it here. "I swear someday I'm just going to disappear and you won't have any idea what happened to me." And at the end of the film, another character says, "And she told me," and he changes his fucking voice. He changes his fucking voice to talk like her. Oh, he goes, "I made it. I was there. I saw the big top." And it's like, what the fuck is this? The fair, right? And the fair, we even see a video game where the fair is always at the horizon, no matter how fast the cacti and trees are going by. It's always out there. You can never get to it.
You can never get to it.
But she did. And it's this weird. Does this make us happy? No. Dysphoria takes over. This is strange shit going on in this movie. And I have to say, for the price of glow-in-the-dark paint, a doll, and 3 actors, maybe a couple actors and volunteers. I looked up all the people who are doing their YouTube videos, and they're not connected with her, essentially,
right.
Or them.
They're yeah, exactly.
They were just asked,
folks she found.
Yeah, folks she found and said, "Can you make something for this film?" And they did. And they never met. I think that's one of the interesting things. Many of the actors never met.
Yeah, right.
So, wow, it's a very intriguing film.
Well, we have chatted long and hard about it, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface. So
I talk too much.
No. Both of us are keen to have others explore this movie so that we can explore it with them. I mean, I tell people that. The reason why I watch movies is so I can talk about movies with other people. It's like, I'm like, yeah, movies are fine, but it's the talking about the movies afterwards that I'm really keen on.
We are compelled to share. We're not hoarders. Some of us hoard certain things, but the information, it is pointless and useless to hold love just for yourself. The weird thing of I just cherish these movies and think to myself, no, it's the idea of sharing that. We're compelled to do that, and that's the joy. You're looking to find the gold so you can share it with somebody else. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Scott. This is Scare-A-Thon 2022. Again, we are benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. The fundraiser link is below in the description, and if this cause moves you in any way, and I certainly hope it does, please feel free to make a contribution. No amount is too large or too small. And this is, that's about it. I'm going to have Scott back later on in the month to talk about another movie. So until then, thank you so much and keep sharing the scare.